Hello and welcome to the special support section of Melee's Turnwheel, the sub-series that takes a retroactive look at Fire Emblem characters support by support. Is that anything? Is that anything at all? You guys have got to let me know. I don't know how to do the intro for this one, but we'll see. I'm going to be doing plenty of these going forward, so I'm sure I'll get better at them as time goes on. But for now, all you need to know is that this is the first of a series of episodes that are going to be dedicated to taking a look at the various characters throughout the Fire Emblem series in games that have dedicated support conversations and talking about them, because I don't have the time to do that on the main episodes. It would take me way too fucking long. So these ones aren't going to be on any sort of like regular release schedule. I'm kind of just going to get them out at any point I can after the main episode goes up. And yeah, we'll go from there, because it's a lot of extra content. I'm gonna be trying to kind of keep these brief and short. I don't have a lot to say about a lot of these characters, especially in 6. I don't think most of the supports in 6 are like gonna take a super long time to talk about. But I guess we'll see. I could be wrong about that. So today we are going to be talking about 4 Fire Emblem 6 characters. Their names are, of course, if you couldn't figure it out from the title, Alan, Lance, Marcus, and Wolt, the Pherae Knights, or Pherae Soldiers, whatever. I'm going to be grouping these guys together, basically, by affiliation, or maybe maybe their class, or something like that. Some way to kind of characterize these guys and talk more about them a little bit. Because I don't want to just do, like, we got Boris, and then we got Lou, and we got, Kath. These characters that have nothing to do with each other. It makes more sense for me to do it this way, I think. And a lot of these guys actually have, if I do it this way, a lot of these characters actually have supports with each other, so that can help clear things up. But basically, the way I'm going to be doing this is I'm going to be going through each of those characters and going through their supports. In the case of, because let's say, for example, I know Marcus has a support conversation with Lance, and also I think Alan, but let's just say Lance. So if we start with Marcus, we're going to be going through his supports, and we get to the Lance one, and I'm going to be talking about the events of the support from the perspective of Marcus, as in, like, what it says to me about Marcus's character, and how it kind of informs how I think about Marcus's character, and not so much Lance. And then when we do Lance, we'll kind of flip the script a little bit and do it that way. So I'm hoping that'll work. This is the first time I'm recording this episode. I haven't, maybe I'll do a take 2 at some point, but maybe not. So we'll see if this works out. I'm hoping that's a good way to do it, and we'll kind of see. You guys will have to let me know if this makes sense to you guys, and if you want to give me some feedback or criticism, by all means, I'm open to hearing your suggestions, because I want to make this as pleasant of a listening experience as possible. There was one other thing I was going to say, but I forgot. That's great. Oh yes, now I remember. So, basically, there are going to be plenty of supports throughout the series, in this game, and in many games to come, where I read it, and I'm like, that sucked. Not even really, because I would talk about that. If there's a support that's just like, that sure was a support in Fire Emblem The Binding Blade, and I really just genuinely have no further thoughts about it, then I might just skip it or very briefly talk about it. Like I said, I want to try to keep these episodes relatively short, and I'm not going to talk about, especially in some of the later games like Awakening and Fates, where every character has like a billion supports. It doesn't make sense to talk about all of them, so I'm only going to be talking about the ones that I feel make meaningful contributions to that character's characterization. And with that, obviously, there's going to be some that I skip over that someone might like. If I skip over the Marcus and Lance support, because I feel like it's not really contributing anything to either of their characters, feel free to be like, hey, I think you missed an opportunity to talk about something that I liked in Marcus's character here, and engage with me a little bit on that. If it is a compelling enough argument, I might even bring it up in the next episode of the special support section, which, by the way, if you don't get the reference to that name, I don't know which episode is going to go up first between this one and the New Year's bonus episode. Whichever one comes out first, just know that the New Year's bonus episode has the reference for that name in it, and I'm very uncreative. And if this series ever gets popular at some point, I'm probably going to get sued, but it doesn't matter. So let's hope. This is the first time I'm hoping that my podcast does not get more popular. But anyway, we're going to start off by talking about the one, the only, Marcus of Pherae. Marcus has 5 support partners. He has Alan, Lance, Wolt, Lilina, and Roy. We are going to be talking about all of them. Roy, I am saving for the very last episode, but I will obviously be talking about all of his support partners over the course of the game, and I'm going to be focusing on their perspective of the support and how it informs their character, and I'm going to be talking about everything to do with Roy at the end, so we don't got to worry about that. But he is one of the characters, one of the many characters in this game that has a support with Roy, so just keep that in mind. So the first 4 supports are very similar from the perspective of Marcus. His supports with Alan, Lance, Wolt, and Lilina are basically, kind of following the same beats, where Marcus serves as kind of the mentor figure. They kind of serve to either bring hidden potential out of the other support partner, or to kind of like show them what they already have at their disposal. So for example, in his support with Alan, he kind of helps him to learn how to be a little bit more composed and to not go charging ahead in battle alone. Pretty simple outside of that. Lance, his support with Lance kind of focuses on the fact that Lance is an outsider to Pherae. He was not born there, but as a result, he kind of has a perspective that everyone else doesn't, and is able to use that to benefit Roy. Wolt kind of feels like he's not living up to his, kind of task of protecting Roy, and wants Marcus to teach him how to use a sword. But Marcus says, listen, you are fine just the way you are. Bows are really strong, and there's some things you can only do with bows. And also, you are around Roy's age, and I want you to kind of be like a friend to him. And for Lilina, he kind of like pushes her towards getting in a relationship with Roy. And in all of these instances, he is kind of the calm, composed figure that helps guide the next generation towards future success, basically. And he says that a couple times, like, I'm old, I'm retiring soon, I want the next generation to take my place, so I want to help you guys become the best knights you possibly can be, basically, is what he says. And in the case of Lilina, I want you to find love with Roy because I feel like you two would be very happy together, that kind of thing. And it's all fine, I don't think any of them individually stand out, but, as you read through them all, you kind of get a sense for what Marcus is like and kind of the way he likes to go about doing things. And you get the sense that he's a very supportive man who really likes bringing out the best in the people around him. That's pretty nice. Now, that's all well and good, but I think what really makes them stand out even more is how starkly they contrast with the Roy support. Marcus's Roy support is way different because it's really the only one where Marcus kind of shows some vulnerability. He is talking to Roy about how, the youth these days don't do anything right, and how he needs to be stricter, and that they're pampered and spoiled, and that they're not able to protect Roy. And Roy has to be like, listen, dude, you gotta chill out a little bit. I'm sure they're doing their best. And in this instance, it's kind of Roy taking on that role of showing Marcus, how to kind of be the best knight that he can be by putting his faith in the others and not necessarily worrying so much that they're not going to live up to expectations. And in the A support, the whole perspective of Marcus saying, I gotta retire, gets turned on his head because he tells Roy, you're doing really well, you're going to be fine without me, I'm going to pass my role on to the next generation. And Roy says, no, please don't go, I order you to stay by my side. And Marcus kind of like says, I don't want to say begrudgingly, like he feels very honored and very touched. He doesn't feel like he's up to it, but he says, like, listen, if that's what you want, then I will serve you until the day I die. And I like that. It's a nice little reversal from all of his other supports. It feels very in character, and shows a side of Marcus that you don't really get from the others. and I enjoyed it quite a bit. I think it characterizes Roy pretty well also, but, we'll save that for another day. So yeah, overall, after reading these supports, I think Marcus is a very, kind of one-note character for the most part, but I do think that there's some cool pieces here that allude to him, being a little bit more vulnerable than he lets on. There's a little depth there with him kind of not being as open with the others as he is with Roy, and yeah, it's nice. It adds a little bit of texture there, and I like it quite a bit. So Marcus, not exactly blowing me away or anything like that, but it's very solid, and I like it quite a bit. He's a very solid character, and I like him quite a bit. Alright, next we are moving on to Alan, whose support partners are Lance, Wolt, Wade, Thea, or Tate. I kind of use those interchangeably, but the middle Pegasus sister. Roy, and then, of course, Marcus. So I'm going to completely skip over the Wolt support because it's not good. It doesn't say anything about either of them. The Lance support is pretty good for Lance. On Alan's side, though, it really only kind of says a lot about how he's confident and how he is willing to cheer. Like, he feels very invested in cheering up Lance and making it very clear that his self-doubt is unwarranted. And I think that's pretty characterful. His support with Wade is cool because they just have a combined one brain cell, and they're fighting and arguing, and it's very funny, and I enjoy that. But no, the real meat here. Well, actually, his support with Roy is very, very good. It's pretty good, but only for Roy. So we're gonna skip that one for now. The real meat and potatoes here I want to talk about is his support with Thea. And first of all, it is an implicitly romantic support, which I want to bring up just because there are a lot of supports in this game that are implicitly romantic. However, paired endings did not exist in this game, or rather, they didn't exist for any character that was not Roy. Roy's choice of wife, I guess, maybe he has one with Marcus too, I don't know, but Roy's choice of support partner, particularly a female support partner, he will have a paired ending that kind of talks about how they end up together. But all the other characters, even ones that have implicitly romantic supports, do not get paired endings. So you kind of have to use your imaginations to fill in the blanks. But this is definitely one that would have had a paired ending if it came out in, if it was in the style of FE7 or FE8. But as for what's actually happening in this support, it's pretty interesting. Alan is very characterized by his brashness, his boldness, his confidence, and that's not really elaborated on in any support other than this one. Thea kind of asks in the B support, like, what is it, like, why is it that you're so brash? Why can't you be more careful? And Alan kind of says, well, if I do that, then that kind of gives the enemy an advantage. No matter how slight, if I flinch or hesitate at all, then I see it as giving the enemy an advantage that I cannot afford to give them. And I think that's interesting. It's a cool perspective. Part of me wonders if that's like the real reason, or if it's just more in line with his personality, and that's just how he's kind of justifying it to himself. But it doesn't really matter. I think that either answer is pretty reasonable. Oh, and he also brings up the fact that because they're on like horseback or they're mounted in some way, they're the ones who are going to meet the enemy head on first. Maybe not so much for Thea, but for Alan, that's definitely true. He's definitely going to be a frontline unit, so it makes sense for him to kind of like, he wants to make a strong first impression on the enemy, basically. I don't know. It's cool to see him kind of like explain where that is coming from, because if you just read the other supports, you wouldn't really get that impression at all, I don't think. You just kind of think he's a hothead, but it is like a calculated plan and a strategy in a sense, and I think that's pretty cool. So next up we have Lance, and Lance has 6 support partners. The 2 we've already seen with Alan and Marcus. Roy, he has one with Clarine, Lot, and Wolt. And honestly, I really like Lance. I never thought much of him before reading these supports, but he's like stoic and like kind of uptight to the point of it being really funny. I think his support with Clarine is a good place to start because it's just really entertaining. Clarine very obviously has like a kind of crush on him, and he is extremely polite and like even-faced about the whole thing. Even though she's making it very obvious. I mean, I don't know if he figures it out. I would have to assume so. It's just entertaining because he's just not having any of it whatsoever. He very quickly and readily kind of humbles himself before her, which I think is kind of characteristic of Lance's character as a whole. He is a very humble man, and in some instances actually lacks confidence in himself. I think mostly in his support with Marcus, but I think you can kind of see it in other areas as well, kind of in his support with Alan as well, where he's kind of like doubting himself and saying like, oh, I don't know if I can do this, and the others kind of have to cheer him up. His support with Wolt and Lot kind of characterize him as being very intelligent. He is apparently a very good strategist. We see him playing chess again, or kind of a knockoff equivalent of chess against Lot, who, by the way, Lot is doing pretty well. So I actually did not know that about Lot, but Lance kind of wins, and they talk about like strategy and things like that. Lance kind of explains to him how the weapon triangle works a little bit. They talk about like the odds in battle, and it kind of comes to a head when Lance starts talking about his commitment to Roy and how he feels super confident that Roy will lead them to victory. He has utmost faith in Roy. And I really wish that was explored more in the Roy support. It's basically just Lance kind of being worrywart about Roy for the entire thing, when I very much would have liked to see kind of like maybe talk about how they first met and why he has such loyalty in him. Maybe Roy did something for him that kind of inspired this. But no, they just kind of, it doesn't really go anywhere. I think that's kind of my main problem with FE6 supports, is that a lot of them are good, but there's usually like a couple that really like dive into the character's backstory, and a lot of them are just missing in this game, and I don't know if that was like an intentional choice or what. Some people might not mind it as much, but I don't know. I would have liked to learn more about Lance, I guess. More so than either Marcus or Alan, for that matter. Oh, and then his Wolt support is just about Wolt reading, but none of the Wolt supports have been like any good at all. I guess we'll talk more about that with Wolt, but it doesn't really characterize Lance very well either. But overall, I'm a big fan of Lance. I think I've been thoroughly Lance-pilled. Definitely my preferred of the Christmas Cavs in this game, I would say, character-wise. Last, and honestly probably least, with how these have been going so far, we have Wolt. Wolt has 5 support partners. We have the 3 we've already seen so far with Alan, Lance, and Marcus. He has one with Roy, and then he has one with Sue, who is a character who we will meet in the next main episode. And for the ones that we've already seen, at best, I can say that it characterizes Wolt as being very earnest, very eager to protect Roy, kind of lacking in confidence, but always very eager to prove himself. It's a little bit of a mix between Alan and Lance, I would say. Like, he has the kind of the gung-ho spirit of Alan to an extent, but also kind of the more lack of confidence of Roy. It literally all of his supports are about, like, I need to get stronger to protect Roy. So that is a very consistent character trait with him. But, past that, it doesn't really do anything for his character. But the others might be a little bit better. The Sue support is, I guess it's fine. They kind of, like, complement each other a little bit and kind of teach each other new perspectives on fighting. It's fine, I guess. But the Roy support is actually genuinely quite good for both characters. I think it shows Wolt as a little bit of a ditz, which I think the other supports do pretty well, but I think they make it a lot more explicit here. It's basically the progression is that Wolt is being very formal with Roy, whereas Roy kind of wants him to be more of a friend rather than a servant. And Wolt is just not having any of that. He's like, I want to be just like Marcus. I want to be just like Merlinus. I want to serve you. And Roy gets a little angry with him. And they kind of hash it out in the A support, not as directly as I would have expected. They don't really resolve the core issue, but Roy seems to be satisfied, which I guess is all that matters. And then he was like, Walt is like, hey, who is this person that you're mad at? Because he kind of like alludes to like, oh, there's a person that I'm mad at, and Walt's like, oh, well, you should do this, that, and that. And then he's like, oh, well, who is it? And he's like, they kind of like go back and forth, and they do like a little gag. It's funny. Look it up, I guess, if you're interested. It's good though. I like this support for both of them quite a bit. So, but man, Walt, not really that good of a character, huh? And he sucks in gameplay too. So I don't really know what you're supposed to do with this guy. I'm not really a big fan, but I guess to each their own. I know people like Wolt, so yeah. The support with Roy is good. So maybe if you just focus on that one, it's not too bad. All right. So with that done, I don't really plan on doing any like character ranking or anything like that. I mean, obviously at the end, I'm probably going to talk about who my favorite character is, but actually that seems like a fun way to end it. I'll talk a little bit about who my favorite character in the SSS episode was. And in this case, I would say it's definitely Lance. I'm not gonna do a gauntlet because that'll give away my answer for who my favorite character is. But at least you'll have a solid idea of who the contenders might be. Lance is definitely my favorite character this episode. I was kind of struck by how much I ended up liking his kind of pleasantly, calm demeanor. And his confidence issues seem interesting, and I'm the way that they tackled them was pretty cool. So, it was good. I enjoyed talking about the Pherae Knights. Next SSS episode, we're probably going to be talking about the mercenaries. So Lot, Wade, Deke, and Shanna. Most likely, I think that's who I've settled on, but I'm not 100% sure yet. So. Keep your eye out for that whenever it comes out. It won't be until after the next main episode, obviously, because maybe not obviously. I don't necessarily intend to stick with like one per main episode. I might, in some of these, especially some of the later ones, I might need more than one SSS episode per main episode. I really don't know. So we'll see how it pans out. I don't have a set release schedule for these. I'm just going to kind of put them out when I can, and hopefully it lines up fairly well. So anyway, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and I will see you all next time. Bye-bye.